But let's, of course, start with the top story where the American President Donald Trump has expressed optimism on striking a nuclear deal with Tehran. He was speaking at a round table in Doha, and the American president said, and I quote him here, "We're getting closer to a deal." But despite the optimism, Donald Trump made sure that he also mentioned the other option that the Americans talk a lot. And this option is what he described as the violent step. He said, "I hope we're not going to take the violent step that people haven't seen before."
And I think we're getting close to maybe doing a deal without having to do this. There's two steps. There's a very, very nice step, and there's a violent step. The violence like people haven't seen before. And I hope we're not going to have to do this. I don't want to do the second step.
The nuclear talks between the United States and Iran have been ongoing for 4 rounds of negotiations. In the last round that was held in the Omani capital of Muscat on Sunday, the American envoy Steve Witkoff presented a draft proposal to Tehran's representatives Abbas Araghchi. The ball is now in the Iranian court. The Iranian foreign minister Abbas Araghchi took the proposal back to Tehran for consultations with the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, President Masoud Pezeshkian and other top Iranian officials. Now, speaking to NBC News, a top advisor to Iran's Supreme Leader earlier said that Tehran was ready to sign a nuclear deal with Donald Trump's administration under certain conditions. In return for the lifting of economic sanctions, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's top political, military and nuclear advisor, Ali Shamkhani, has said, and I quote, "Iran will commit that it won't build nuclear weapons, get rid of its enriched uranium, will enrich uranium only for civilian use and let international inspectors to monitor everything if all economic sanctions are lifted immediately." Meanwhile, the Europeans are also ramping up pressure on Tehran. Senior diplomats from Iran and the E3, that is France, the United Kingdom and Germany, are expected to meet in Istanbul on Friday. And according to the European diplomats, the 3 European powers have decided to trigger snapback sanctions under the 2015 nuclear deal if no deal is reached by August. Now, the American president has defined a very clear red line on nuclear talks with Iran, and that is Tehran cannot have a nuclear weapon. Uranium enrichment for nuclear energy is no longer a point of contention, but it all comes down to trust. The mechanism to establish trust will be crucial for any Iran-US nuclear deal. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening with this Iranian nuclear deal negotiations, we are joined on this broadcast by Dr. Paul Doffman, who is a Bennett Scholar at the Bennett Institute, University of Sussex. He's also a member of the Irish Government Radiation Protection Advisory Committee and chair at the Nuclear Consulting Group. Mr. Doffman, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on this broadcast. Now, Donald Trump has repeatedly been sounding very optimistic, saying that the talks with the Iranians are going pretty well. He says that the only red line for the Iranians is that they cannot have a nuclear weapon. And the Iranians have said that so long as economic sanctions are lifted, they don't want a nuclear weapon. In your assessment, can Donald Trump unilaterally now strike an Iranian nuclear deal without the Israelis being on board?
Life is full of irrational paradoxes. The Trump administration was the reason why the first agreement with Iran crashed in 2018. But if this agreement works, it's a very real step in the right direction, with Iran, as you say, signifying very real, far-reaching curbs on military nuclear programming and allowing the IAEA inspection. There are 3 red lines that remain, apparently. First is the question of reduction to what level of enrichment. Now, in terms of civil, you need about 4% uranium enrichment. In terms of military for a bomb, about 80–90%. But you can put out a viable nuclear weapon for about 60%. So the question is, how low will the Iranians enrich to? If there's an agreement, where will that enriched uranium stock, which the Iranians already have, be sent to? And will that uranium be moved all in one go, or will it be moved piecemeal? Now, in terms of Israel, as with most things in terms of the Trump administration, things are very movable. There is some discussion that Trump is moving slightly away from Israel in this connection. However, there are also concerns that Israel is potentially lobbying Washington in regards to this deal. In reality, there's no real way of knowing.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's a very difficult and a speculative question to look forward to. But considering how things are going, do you think now the Trump administration has probably conceded that the Iranians can have a civil nuclear program that could possibly be replicated by the Saudis and other players such as Egypt as well within the region, and the Trump administration can make peace with the Iranians having a civil nuclear program?
A civil nuclear program would be completely acceptable. It would be completely acceptable to the international community and to the IAEA, to the UN International Nuclear Regulatory Institution. So there's no problem with Iran having a civil nuclear program. The only issue of contention is one of enrichment. In other words, you need to enrich uranium to about 90%, or
right,
at least 60% to get a bomb. For a civil, you need about 3 to 4%. So the absolute key to this is the level of enrichment.
All right.
But yes, of course, Iran allowed a nuclear program.
You know, one quick last question. Do you think an Iranian civil nuclear program would be acceptable to the Israelis? Because they're dead against any kind of a nuclear deal with Iran. They were dead against the Iranian nuclear deal of 2015. But now for Trump to agree to a civilian nuclear program for the Iranians, do you think Tel Aviv would agree to that?
It's a complex issue. Of course, on the horizon is a Saudi-US nuclear deal, which may allow the Saudis to go nuclear. And of course, just recently, the US-Qatar defense deal. So it's it's an interlocking set of issues here. In terms of Israel, it's very difficult to understand what they will or won't accept, given they're not behaving necessarily rationally at the moment. But in terms of a civil nuclear, why not?
All right, we'll have to see as to how it unfolds. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Dauphin, for joining us with that perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.